Alright, good evening everyone. Hey, welcome to today's live session. Good. So as usual, we'll be updating the outlook for the markets.
It's the same word for the hospital. We can't stay here. That deconscious the consulate.
Right. We'll be updating the market outlook over here. And of course, last Friday NFP wasn't much of an impact, but prior to NFP, we did see the dollar actually move quite significantly already. Definitely there are some policy and fundamental shift. Of course, with Trump coming in, we have tariffs ongoing. The whole conversation about trade war with China has started, and not only China. Okay, we saw that with Mexico. We saw that with Canada. Um, yeah, so there are some volatile movements in the market, and of course, equities market has also been generally moving lower. Okay, so there are a couple of things that we'll be updating. Okay, so let's start off by looking at the overview of the dollar index. Generally, we're gonna maintain a bearish bias, while perhaps short term we might see some sort of a pullback. But until we have a impulsive move to the upside, generally you want to be leaning more towards bearish point of view. Okay, so if I kind of zoom out and really take a what we call a bigger picture perspective, a bird's eye view point of angle here, we can definitely see there are downside possibility and room for the market to even move lower. So if I kind of shift to the daily time frame, right? I think sometime back last year, we even talked about the possibility of how this can be a three-wave structure, right? So if that's gonna be a possible view count, then there is a very good chance that price may even retest this low, and that would put us around the 99.6 region. Okay, and of course we're trading right now, and dollar index is about 103.50, right? So this is really more of like a big picture perspective. Okay, is there opportunity to buy and then eventually like sell and things like that? Yes, right. Doesn't necessarily mean that if this is looking at downside, then you just want to be selling the dollar. But of course, if you're more of a longer time frame picture perspective, looking at maybe 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, there's a good possibility that may happen, right? Because this would then complete that tree wave, okay, and this would open up the development of a impulsive leg like that, okay. So that's on the really higher time frame, right? You can see that's on the daily point of view. So on the 4 hour time frame here, that might be the first leg down as a 1 2 3, and then 4 and 5. Okay. So do we have? Let me bring back my text. Okay. Okay. So do we have any opportunity like in the near term, specifically like within this week, right? So today's Tuesday. Looking at things here, we have a bit of a crawlish development. Of course, the divergence is building up here as well. We might get maybe a short-term bounce, or you can look at it as a short-term buy the retracement kind of setup, going into the second half of this week, right? But of course, it's not like right now today. We do have the first element here. If we can get a break of this, we still need that pullback to get involved, right? So there's still a couple of running components that needs to be developed before the buy setup really establish itself. But that would probably be the nearest trade setup, possibly that can develop like really in the near term within this week, right? So that's my take on dollar index, at least from a technical point of view, right? So moving forward, maybe short term here we have that pullback opportunity, but really more towards the downside. Okay. So of course then that would start to open up some perspective on the other instruments, you know, like major pairs related to dollar, gold. You know, if you're trading like commodities against the dollar, that would also give you some idea. Okay. So then, of course, euro dollar here would then also be translated to the overview here. Pretty similar. Okay. The idea is then this will be one, and then this would be the pullback, and then this can opens up the possibility where euro dollar, you know, retest this high, right? So same thing here, just the opposite kind of a direction with the dollar index. Pattern wise is a little bit different, but you can see this is really developing more of like the wedge ending diagonal structure, right? With RSI divergence as well. So short term, there's that good possibility we can look for the pullback, right? I mean, the FIP here is a little bit early because price is still pushing higher. There's a lot of adjustment if you're gonna keep doing that. But the idea here is, you know, short term there's a pullback, right? But of course, looking at this development, we may not get any setup to sell it, okay? Because even if you go down to the lower time frame, you don't really see a very clean setup to sell, right? I mean, this can develop, coming down, break of that, pullback, but by then, you know, the downside may not be really significant. I mean, the room for us to potentially look for profit may not be huge. So euro dollar, possibly we just want to wait out for that pullback, and then if the pullback is really corrective in nature, we'll be considering more of the upside from there on. Right, so that's my take on the euro side of things. GBP USD more or less the same. I don't think this would really present any sort of a sell setup in the near term. But of course, if you can get a corrective pullback towards a key area, we can expect to look for buy setup, right? Okay. So while we are expecting that pullback, sometimes market structure would present an opportunity for us to sell it as a short-term trade. Sometimes we don't, right? If we don't, then we just wait for the pullback to complete, and then we trade with the overarching direction eventually. Okay, so that's on the pound and the euro. Aussie is currently reacting off the key area, which is, you know, great. So I would start to pay a little bit more attention on the Aussie on the lower time frame. Okay. And see if we can really get an opportunity, right? We do have, again, going higher time frame first, jumping a little bit, right? We do have the higher time frame alignment where from this low here, we have the first push. You can see that is likely a leading diagonal. We have this pullback. We have a V-shaped formation, which is, you know, establishing this as a near-term low. Then, of course, we get this pullback. Not really the most corrective pullback, but it has the element of a tree wave. Seems to be reacting off this key area very nicely as well. And right now, the major primary view is this would develop as a tree wave and complete the ABC, right? So that's my current take, okay? Then if you go down to the lower time frame, we do see, okay, I mean, yesterday we did have a very, very quick view on, like, you know, this is the liquidity sweep, okay? This would be the break of structure. We have this move down. This is pretty corrective in nature. That would build into 1, 2, 3, right? There was an opportunity to actually look to take this down. Yesterday we did have the session in Chinese and Mandarin, right? After that, I was looking at this. There was that setup, okay, but I think you guys will be familiar. You know, usually I look at that FIP. Didn't really come like significantly close, right? I mean, this is on the hourly, so that's like 5 pips away from the entry, but it did not get in. But if it had, then that would be a pretty decent opportunity to sell it, right? So yeah, that was the setup yesterday, right? But it didn't got tagged or anything at all. So today I wouldn't be looking to sell anymore because again on the hard time frame, price has reached the key area, and more likely right now we're looking at the upside. So we do have the initial liquidity sweep over here, you can see the market attempt to break that low. We have this as a primary kind of like swing high here. Ideally, this can keep going higher tonight to give us a clean break. Okay. If this can give us a nice little move up, this would start to build in some sort of a order block moving forward as well. And then if you can get a pullback, that will be a decent buy setup, right? So this is definitely going into my watch list for this week. Okay, and I would really keep an eye on, like, moving forward. Can we get something out of this trade to the upside? Okay. Yeah, so that's on Aussie, and then we have the dollar CAD. Dollar CAD is very, very tricky this year, right? Because of Canada being involved and US being involved. This pair is just crazy, right? We have, like, start of the year, huge upside, huge downside, right? And then market starts to move lower, and I was looking at it with the perspective, it clears off all this significant low, right? So I was just kind of expecting, a pullback, but I didn't expect these kind of deep pullback, right? Back at those months, right? We were expecting a pullback and continuation. There wasn't any setup, but again, that was the view, and then the market just went pop. And then there's this period where you can see up, down, right? And these are not lower time frames, these are already H4, right? So this pair is just not easy to be really taking trades on because of all the volatility. And again, why is that the case? Because of really a lot of all these policies are still in developments, right? Whether that's like tariffs, counteracting on it, then discussion, negotiation, things like that. Things are always moving, right? So what's the take right now on dollar CAD? Purely from a technical point of view, as long as this high remains intact, we are expecting downside, right? I mean, the bare minimum kind of expectation is just a simple tree wave development, right? Something like that. Okay. Yeah. So that's the take. Again, do we have a setup right now to be getting involved? No. Okay. I don't foresee any near-term setup, at least within the week as well. So I think overall we have a directional bias, but setup wise we don't really have anything. Perhaps if the market comes back up, did a liquidity sweep, come back down, moving forward we may get something, but for now there's really nothing there. Okay, then we have dollar yen. Dollar yen seems to be potentially building something as well. Again, the price has been respecting the channel structure quite nicely since late last year, early this year. We get this drop. Okay. On top of that, we also have a divergence building up, right, from this low here to this low. So to be looking at this here, I wouldn't be interested in focusing on the sell side, but I'll really be just interested to turning bullish, which means I'll be interested more of like when will price starts to reverse and start moving higher. Okay. It's a little bit counterintuitive because if the dollar index were to drop, right, then it's really hard to envision the dollar yen to actually go higher, right, because there's a dollar involved in it. But at the same time, I always approach currency pairs here as independent charts themselves, and I only really use the idea of correlation to manage the exposure side of things, right? In other words, yeah, the dollar index seems to be suggesting downside, but if the dollar yen chart is presenting an upside based on the analysis on dollar yen by itself, I would still be more interested in the upside, right? So I don't really use correlation to determine the trade or the direction of the trade. I use correlation to manage the overall exposure. In other words, if I'm going to take a sell or a buy, let's say we take a buy on dollar yen, and then we also take a buy on, let's say, pound yen, right? Then that will be 2 times the exposure on yen. Understanding the correlation on that spec, I manage my risk accordingly, right? So that's how I use correlation. So dollar yen here, definitely focusing more on the upside perspective. We have divergence, we have this little crawl structure, so there's a very good chance it's likely going to bounce. We are just simply waiting for that confirmation. Okay, let me clean up a little bit. We're just simply waiting for price. Okay, so if I kind of draw it in, right, we have this liquidity sweep, right? We do have price attempt to break this high, but to be very honest, it's not a very clean break at the moment. If you want a little bit more confirmation, this here would be the confirmation that we would love to see, right? Meaning price needs to really carry momentum higher than that pullback. Okay, because what can happen is this can just be a simple small little break, and then the market can just keep coming down. This can continue for some time before the eventual move. Okay, so I'm just being a little bit cautious on that, right? Because we are essentially trying to catch the reversal. Okay, so I need like the market to really tell me the sign of reversing. Then yeah, we're gonna get that, right? So are we gonna get it within this week? It's very, very difficult to say. It really depends on, again, market development. There's so many things that can change. But for now, this is something interesting to keep an eye on. Okay, then we have gold. Gold here, this is the current view. Okay, but in yesterday Chinese session, I also kind of mentioned, right, we need to be open to the possibility where it may not break immediately to the upside, but it can face some resistance here, and the market can actually come back down to complete this tree wave. Okay, so that was what we also briefly mentioned during yesterday's session. Again, it's not uncommon. It's from time to time you will encounter a situation like that. So the part here is, do we then look to buy from here, or are we gonna just wait for this to come down, then only buy here? Or how do we manage situation like that, right? So of course you need to be you need to be accepting the fact that there's no 100% certainty, okay? Because we won't know for sure what's gonna happen. But what we can do is we can do a mental prep. We have like scenario 1, which is from here the market just goes higher. We have scenario 2 where this can come down, right? And almost every instances in the market, there is the either or. Okay, there are more than one scenarios that the market can eventually play out. And all we do is just picking a direction, a potential scenario, and if it fulfills certain conditions that allow us to execute a trade, we just make a decision on that and put in the risk aspect, right? Put in the risk management, knowing when to cut and things like that. That's essentially what trading is, right? You never know 100% what's gonna happen. So if you ask me, gold, this is my primary take, right? Are we gonna see really that break? I mean, what would be the extra confirmation to tell us that it's likely gonna go high is an impulsive break out of this channel. Then at least the market is telling you, all right, we're breaking out with momentum. We're probably gonna keep going higher. Okay, because this is basically an impulse correction combination as well. Right, if I'm gonna take away the channel, okay, it changes the perspective a little bit, right? You can also see this as, oh, that's the correction that's done. This is a V shape. This is impulse correction combination. It can go higher. But if I'm gonna add a channel in, and let's say I even remove this drawing over here, put this further away, take this away, and then I'll start to include some kind of arrow here, it changes the entire perspective, right? And I can push wave 4 here. Can see that, right? It's basically the same thing. How you frame it, okay, based on your analysis would give you a slightly different point of view. Right? So that's how the market is. Okay. So if you ask me how am I gonna look at things here, obviously there are risks inherent, right? There's nothing 100%. But what we can look out for is we pick a primary scenario to focus. Like in this case here, if we're gonna focus on upside. Okay, so you need to understand if you're being a little bit more conservative, what is the downside? The downside is you're gonna miss a potential trade. Can you accept that, right? If you're gonna be a bit more aggressive, what is the downside? The downside is you might take a loss. Okay, so there's no right answer. You need to make your own decision, right? Are you more comfortable in taking a risk for potential reward? Are you more comfortable in not taking a trade so that you can avoid a loss? Okay, that would be basically what you need to make your decision on. Okay, so in terms of setup, right? We do have this liquidity here, a little bit of double bottom. Okay, this here you can count it as a potential break, not the cleanest of all. Obviously, if you want to be more conservative, it'll be here, which means that we technically, if you follow this, we do not have a break of the previous high yet, right? This needs to go higher, then when you come back. Okay, so again, depending on how strict you are in all those conditions. But we have that key area where market is reacting off that 50%, right? So if today you just take this here and let's say we put in a fib, right? From SMC kind of model, the fib here lies a little bit lower than where the order block really would be. But it is, depending again whether you want to really follow this. Sometimes it does bounce nicely, sometimes it just barely misses it. But the idea here is if this starts to come back down correctively, okay, that would present a buy setup. Okay, that would present a buy setup. So again, I'm sharing with you what possible setup there are. As of today, I don't have a pending order, right? Because again, this is like very, very near to the top. We just need to wait for it to even at least pull back to get a valid setup, right? Yeah, so this is definitely what I'm seeing on gold right now. Spending a little bit more time here to really explain that because this opens up the possibility where there are various scenarios ongoing. Okay. Yeah, so then we have silver here as well, which more or less going to be in the same situation as gold, right? Okay. So silver here, same thing, right? You can see that not the most ideal, but if you take this here as a potential fake break or liquidity sweep, then price needs to take that out, okay, before that pullback. Yeah, so the idea here again, this is really bouncing off a key area, okay, not really touching, but it got very close, okay. And the idea is if you want a little bit more confirmation, you wait for this break, then the pullback, and you can trade it to the upside, right? So gold and silver, I have it currently in my watch list to keep an eye on things moving forward, how it's going to develop. Okay. Yeah, then we'll see from there, right? Because the market can shift on a day-to-day basis. So right now, this is the point of view. Okay, crude oil since last week, to be honest, nothing much has shifted. We can't talk about like this low is significant, right? Because if that breaks, it breaks a very, very significant area for crude oil. Okay, so I'm neutral now because I really want to see, are we gonna break it or are we gonna bounce off it, right? So if we can bounce off it and take out this neckline, right? As of now, we are seeing this more of like a potential double bottom. This would be the neckline. If you can take that out, this itself would shift the entire bias to turning bullish. And if we can get a corrective pullback, that would be a bullish setup, right? So on the H4 time frame, if you can get a break above any corrective pullback, that would be a H4 SMC model, right? We can technically look to set up and take the trade on the 4-hour. We can also technically just drop to a lower time frame as this pulls back, look at the lower time frame for the entry. Okay, but for now, I don't think this week there's gonna be anything, right? Because this takes time for the model to establish itself. Okay, so that's on crude oil. S&P, which is basically the US market, yeah, there's a brief moment of volatility here, but then after that, basically the market starts to move lower. Okay, are we in a bear market? I wouldn't put it that we are in a bear market, right? It's a 10%, close to a 10% drop from the peak. Now there are some technical ways of defining a bear market is when market drops like 20% or more from its peak. Technically we'll classify that as a bear market. I mean, we are halfway there, but for it to drop another 10%, it's quite a distance, right? Okay. Yeah. So would this scale just be something like that? Again, we won't know the future, but really depends on like how Trump's policy is gonna move forward, right? So from a purely technical point of view, there's really no reason to be taking any trades right now. With this movement, right? You don't want to be selling it, you don't want to be buying it where it is right now, until you gain more structure information, right? Which means that if the market comes back correctively, which is, if it's going to be the case, it's going to take time, then there's no need to rush, right? You don't need to be FOMO. And if that's going to be a case, then it's telling you there's a high chance the market may continue to drop lower, okay? Then of course there's a scenario where this just decides to do a V-shaped bounce up. Yeah, then that will also change certain things, right? Because if this comes back correctively, then it may establish like what I showed you earlier, right? It may establish this part here, okay? So if it bounces up impulsively, then that may establish it. Yeah, so I think in terms of like US equities this week, again, probably you're not gonna get anything much out of it. Okay. Pound yen, very tricky moments since like late last month to this month. You can see how the market wicks quite a lot. Did a push down, did a push up, did a push down, right? Again, moments like that is just tough. The markets are not moving cleanly, right? But I think general point of view is still there is that possibility of an upside to complete the bigger structure WXY. It's just that we don't have a setup that we can take a trade, right? I mean, if you go down to the lower time frame on pound yen, I mean, after today with this push, it might open up some ideas where we can look at this setup here. Okay, and then this coming back down towards the zone for the upside. Yeah, I mean, that might open up that possibility, okay? But what I'll do is I'll just wait until tomorrow to see if this starts to pull back. Is it a corrective pullback or is it going to be an impulsive pullback? Okay, so if I kind of start to label a little bit, not the cleanest sweep, okay, on the bottom here, okay, but you would still classify it as a technical break of structure, but didn't really continue lower and then kind of reverse quite instantly, right? I would still put it as that way. So this would then be your swing low. Okay, so back to a higher time frame, that is your swing low. If you can get a pullback, then that opens up the upside. Okay, odd yen here, just gonna maintain neutral. You can see that basically it's just V shapes, right? So nothing there. I'll just leave it as it is. Okay, then we have pound odd. This one here is also a little bit unfortunate. We're looking at possibly, trading that short-term pullback in 3 waves, right? Again, looking at counter trend, sometimes you need to understand we are going against the market trend. There is that probability of making it, but of course sometimes things like that happen. But pound odd here, I think it's likely gonna just complete that 5 wave. Okay, and I don't think you want to be looking at buy in that area, but instead to wait and see if we can complete a 5th wave, and is there a setup that we can look to kind of again trade the pullback. Yeah, but right now it's definitely still bullish overall. But again, you can see like where we are right now versus like the potential target. Okay, for the 5th wave is really not too far off, so you may not have a lot of like reward potential to the upside, right? So that's on pound odd. Okay, and then Bitcoin here is basically V-shaped after one another, right? Since like late February, you can see this late February, we have like massive drop, massive rise, massive drop, massive rise, massive drop, right? A lot of V-shapes developing. So things like that probably just not traded. If I were to zoom out, okay, we don't really get something very clear as well at the moment, right? Because if you kind of really look at it on the daily scale perspective, this can still be a valid pullback and the market can continue to just hit higher from there, right? I mean, this low is still intact. This is overall still a momentum push. Okay. So if you ask me, is it a bearish market? No. But do understand from this low to that high, it's a very wide movement, right? I mean, you can look at this. 49,000. The peak is 109. Okay, so this itself is almost like what? 60,000 range. It's not small. Okay, it's a very volatile instrument. But I'm just showing you big picture perspective. This itself is not a bearish trend. Okay, it's a bearish momentum. Yeah, the market is coming down, but it's not a bearish trend, right? It's still overall in a pretty bullish market if you look at it on a daily scale. Okay, so 4 hour here, what would be my take? Okay, let me just clean out a little bit of things here. Okay, on a 4 hour perspective, I would really wait out until all these V shapes are done. Okay, so what I mean by that is we have this low broken. If the market just V-shape back up and starts to form a correction instead of a V-shape back down, that would start to build. Maybe this would be upside, right? Because we have this liquidity sweep. However, if the market just starts to consolidate and build up a corrective move here, then maybe it's telling you downside. But then again, you want to be cautious because this corrective move here can also build into a diagonal structure, which doesn't necessarily mean more downside. But of course, in the near term, you can still capitalize on movement like that. Right? Yeah, so that's on Bitcoin, right? So I think right now, if you ask me to really suggest something on Bitcoin, I think there's really nothing clear. Probably just just be patient, right? Honestly, just stay out from it at the moment. Okay. Good. Let me answer some of the comments over here. I do see one from Dio mentioning that notice on the euro dollar from wave 4 FIP. We're looking at 236. Will there be a chance of trade too? Yes, right, because the idea on FIP on wave 4 for the retracement is often between 382 and 236. I mean, my chart I put it at 236 because like that's the first projection, right? Okay. Yeah. So the idea is I don't like to put in too many things, so I just clean it up. Anyway, because if the market were to pull back, that will be your first area of interest anyway, right? The 236. What's my view on the dollar franc? Let's look at it. Okay, it managed to clear off the channel here, right? So let me just remove that. Okay, it's a little bit impulsive to the downside, so I would update my whole perspective on this a little bit. Okay, I would really start to see this as, let's see if it tested the 618, right? Okay, probably not there yet. I would start to see it from this angle. This looks pretty corrective as it's developing, so there would be that chance of one more push down to a 618. Okay, now the overall count here, I would just make it very simple. Okay, I would see this would probably be a three-way. I mean, if you want to be very technical on that, more of a potential ABC instead of a WXY, because this looks three-wave here. Okay, I mean, if you want to put in a five-wave here, that can, sorry, a five-wave here, and then you want to put in five-wave, that will be a five-wave too, right? And then from there, okay, the whole view, this is on the 4-hour zoom out, right? The whole view is that this is coming down, yes, right? But we haven't really break the previous low. Okay, so this entire count can still be valid, and then from here, price can start to bounce higher. Okay, but of course, this is like moving forward really into like maybe next month or so, right? But for now, if you zoom back in, a near-term opportunity would be if this forms a corrective pullback, you may get an opportunity to sell it. Okay, so again, what's your strategy? What's your setup? Those are the things you need to be very clear with, right? Yeah, so dollar franc, right? Potentially key areas here or potential key target is around like 8690. Given if this pulls back correctively, you can look to sell it with a target, back at that 8690 zone. Right? Cool. All good? Cat yen. Okay. This is technically testing the low. So again, why I'm doing that is because I really want to build in the context of like where we are right now, right? So we can see that this is a previous low and the market's kind of reacting off that right now. I would want to, obviously I wouldn't be selling at this point, right? Where the previous key low is. But again, if I want to buy it up, okay, I need to see some minor high gets broken to give me that confirmation price is indeed starting to go higher, right? Because if it doesn't break those highs with momentum, it's not showing indication that it wants to reverse or it wants to U-turn to the upside, right? So you need to wait for that. Of course, if you want to be even more conservative, this is technically your swing high. Okay, that's your minor high, that's your swing high. Okay, so Probably you want to wait for that as a confirmation to look for upside. Again, I wouldn't want to be selling because we are testing that low, right? Unless the market can really close below this low with momentum, then that's another story, right? Okay, that will open up really downside opportunity. But for now, speaking of where we are right now, then this is still a very significant low price point, right? So you want to see how price is gonna develop moving forward from here for the cat yen side of things. Good. Okay, if nothing else, I hope that the session has been helpful, giving you guys an overview of the market. There's certain things that we can look out for this week. Not really concrete yet, but definitely things that is on the watch list that's worthy of taking note of, right? Dario here mentioned Euro New Zealand. Yeah, okay. There's a divergence on this, but the thing that I don't like, based on just the price action here, is this is a bit steep, right? A more typical crawl would be something more gentler. Okay, you can see that this high was broken with momentum. This high was broken with momentum as well. Yes, there's a divergence. We don't want to be buying into such pattern structure, um, but it's definitely not a very clean crawl. Okay, this here would actually be very much kind of similar. I would say a little bit towards like euro dollar, but you can see euro dollar, even this break, it didn't really go very far. This break seems a little bit far, so that's why you need to be a little bit patient right now. But if you just compare the euro New Zealand is really different, right? You can see the break is with momentum. Okay, so this one, yeah, there is a divergence, but it's definitely not something I'll be very keen in looking at the reversal at the moment. Okay, because this is so strong, for you to get that confirmation the price would reverse, right? It needs to take out this first, and by the time you need to wait, okay? Because this is not a small move anyway, right? So if you imagine if a crawl is a little bit gentler, you realize that it's easier for market to confirm the U-turn, right? Because this is not very sharp. But if you look at in comparison, this move is very impulsive, relatively, right? It's impulsive. So I wouldn't really pay too much attention to something like that. Cool. Okay, so with that, that's all that I have. Let's see how the market continue to develop. Okay, those that I've highlighted probably can pay a little bit more attention. Let me just double check. Yeah, those are the couple of things to look up for. Okay, yeah. So those are the ones that I think worthy to flag it. Okay, have it in your watch list for the week and then see how things develop from there. Okay, so all the best. That's all from me for today's session, and see you guys in the next one.